Claire's dog was wearing safety goggles. That should have been my first clue the world had fully come unhinged. Monday, 10:14 a.m., lab floor, she marched in like a fashion-forward Caesar, clutching her Instagram-famous French bulldog, Misso, like it was a clutch purse and not a squirming ball of allergies. Misso was decked out in a lab coat with a little faux badge that read Chief Marketing Officer. Claire beamed like this was Cannes, not a biohazard-restricted clean zone. Everyone, quick photo op for the brand Unity campaign, she chirped, waving a pastel ring light like a wand. Misso wants you to woof for wellness. Aren't we excited? I wasn't, not even close. I was knee-deep in finalizing our compliance renewal checklist, something that didn't pair well with glitter dog bows and squeaky toys on sterile surfaces. Claire hovered behind me, practically vibrating with influencer energy. Maya, come on, scoot in, she purred, already adjusting her phone tripod. You're gonna stand next to Misso and hold the speaker. He'll bark when it's time to smile. I turned slowly. Claire, this is a controlled lab. We can't have pets in here, especially not unrestrained. It's a violation of, she cut me off with a sing-song voice. You really don't get it, do you? This isn't just science anymore. It's a lifestyle, a brand. And if you don't support the brand, she shrugged like it pained her. Well, you don't get the hours. She said it with a laugh, like she was joking, like HR wouldn't burst into flames if they heard her. But the next morning, my hours were quietly cut from 32 to 28, just enough to disqualify me from benefits, just enough to show me where I stood. And HR, radio silence, no explanation, no documentation, just a system update and a cold auto email with the subject line, schedule adjustment notice. Claire waltzed by my desk later, sipping an iced matcha that smelled like regret and peppermint gum. No hard feelings, Maya. It's just a vibes thing, you know? She chirped, as if she hadn't just lobotomized my paycheck with a smile. Now, pause right there, folks. Before we go further, if you're enjoying this descent into corporate hell, take 2 seconds to smash that like button and hit subscribe. Seriously, 90% of y'all listening right now aren't even subscribed. And let me tell you, every click fuels our little rebellion against HR-approved madness. It keeps this channel alive and keeps Claire shaking in her heels. Now back to the chaos. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't march into her office with a speech about loyalty or ethics or whatever hallmark nonsense Claire probably expected. I just opened my calendar, scrolled forward. I knew something she didn't. You see, every year around this time, a little ticking time bomb sits on our systems, a renewal form that determines whether our lab is legally allowed to operate. Not a suggestion, not a guideline. A legal requirement, tightly regulated, federally tracked, and subject to surprise inspection. That form needs 3 things: current certification, complete documentation, and the digital signature of a fully authorized compliance officer working a minimum of 30 hours a week. Guess who had been the only authorized signer for the past 4 years? Guess who now worked 28 hours? Guess what Claire just invalidated with her vibes? I didn't say a word. Just logged into the compliance dashboard, updated my employment status, and flagged the renewal form as incomplete. No dramatics, no big red warnings, just a quiet internal note that said, pending authorization. The system auto-escalated it to legal per protocol. I printed the page, signed and dated it, filed it in my locked desk drawer with a small, satisfied breath. Claire could play with puppies and hashtags all day, but she just pulled the pin on something bigger than she could imagine. And when the explosion came, I'd be exactly where I was now, sitting calmly, eyes forward, hands clean. And Claire? She'd be holding a dog in a lab coat, wondering why no one could access the reactor room. Let the countdown begin. The next morning, the lights flickered in the compliance server room. Nothing ominous, just a momentary hum, the kind of glitch no one notices unless you're the person watching everything. And that person was me. I sat at my desk with the usual corporate coffee in a recycled cup that smelled like cardboard and burnt ambition. My screen glowed with the same alert it had shown all week. Annual operational license renewal, incomplete. 3 checkboxes, 2 were green. 1, authorized signatory verification, was red, blinking soft and slow like a heartbeat fading out. I clicked into it. Read the clause again. Must be reviewed and digitally signed by a currently employed, board-approved compliance officer working no fewer than 30 hours per week at time of signature. 28 hours, that's what Claire gave me. I wasn't mad about the hours anymore. I was fascinated by them, because now, legally, I couldn't sign the license even if I wanted to. I was no longer eligible, and that, by pure accident or dumb arrogance, meant our lab was operating under a license that, in the eyes of the federal government, was a balloon with a slow leak. I flagged the task in the internal compliance system as blocked, insufficient authority, added a timestamp, linked the HR update. The software did what it was supposed to. It sent an automated notice to legal, HR, and the executive board, a subject line no one reads, a warning no one takes seriously. Claire certainly didn't. She saw the system flagged during our weekly brand culture sync meeting. Yes, that's what she actually called it now, and waved it away with one dismissive flick of her gel-manicured hand. It's just a back-end hiccup, she said, while wearing a sweatshirt that said Slay Compliant in glitter font. Tech will patch it. Maya, let's stay brand positive, okay? Sure, let's stay brand positive. I didn't argue, just printed the error summary from the dashboard. 74 lines, all system generated, all irrefutable. I signed the bottom, date stamped it, and slid it into my drawer next to a backup USB and a stress ball shaped like a double helix. People think revenge is some grand dramatic event, a confrontation, a slap, a walkout. But the truth, it's a file folder, a system log, a well-timed pause in action. I disabled auto-renewal on the license form. Not sabotage, just procedure. If you're not eligible to sign, you're obligated to pause automation and wait for new authorization. That's the rule. Page 84 of the Compliance Handbook. Claire never read it, most of them don't. Back in HR, some intern probably clicked acknowledge on the system alert without reading it, assuming it was a duplicate. Claire saw the red badge next to my task in the project tracker and said, just make sure it's done before next month's audit, okay? That's the thing about deadlines. Some don't bark, they whisper. And if you're too busy dressing your dog for another Instagram post, you won't hear the ticking. Meanwhile, our compliance dashboard, my pride and joy, really was growing spikier. Not broken, not even flagged as urgent, just fragile, vulnerable, one overdue chemical log entry here, one expired vendor license there, death by 1,000 ignored checkboxes. The kind of thing only someone like me would track because only someone like me had ever cared. Now, I didn't care either. I was documenting, not fixing. Observing, not solving. Letting the system speak for itself, and it did. Quietly, persistently. Claire posed with Miso again that afternoon, this time on a yoga mat in the break room. She called it corporate self-care. Someone in marketing uploaded it to the internal portal with a caption that read, "Balance is compliance." I almost laughed. Balance, yes, but the scales were shifting. And no one, not Claire, not HR, not the oblivious board, noticed that the person holding the scales had just taken a step back. They called it a culture alignment review, but let's not sugarcoat it. It was a performative ambush in a conference room that still smelled like catered sadness from last quarter's earnings call. Claire had somehow convinced the people ops team, formerly HR, now repackaged as human vibe architects, I kid you not, that our department needed a realignment, not a performance review. She clarified in the email, just a vibes check-in/growth dialogue. The kind of nonsense that sounds like granola but hits like a pink slip. There were donuts. Always are when something ugly's about to happen. I sat at the far end of the table, next to the printer that made a wheezing sound like it was trying to warn me. Claire stood in front of the projection screen, arms crossed. Miso nestled in a branded baby sling across her chest like a furry marsupial of menace. The slideshow began. Slide 1 was a pastel mood board with phrases like authenticity is our currency and synergy over silos. Slide 2 was a pie chart showing something called brand engagement differential, with one wedge, bright red, labeled compliance. My team. Her voice was sing-song sweet. Now, you've noticed a disconnect between compliance practices and our evolving brand narrative. It's not punitive, just exploratory. Then came the anecdote slide. A screenshot of me blurry mid-walk taken from the lab security cam. Captioned, misbrand moment, lack of engagement during mascot morale initiative. That mascot being her dog, that initiative being a photo shoot. I kept my face neutral. The others shifted uncomfortably. My team lead, Marcus, stared at the floor like it might open and swallow him. Claire clicked again. We don't want to name names, she said after naming me in the photo. But some people seem disengaged, resistant to culture. Maybe even misaligned with our future direction. I took a sip of the coffee I'd brought in. Cold now, bitter just like me. When she finally paused for breath, likely exhausted from the weight of her own self-congratulation, I looked up and asked, steady as a metronome, "Can I have that in writing?" A hush fell. You could hear the projector fan change pitch. Claire smiled the way people do when they've stepped in gum but want to pretend it's intentional. "Oh, sweetie, no, it's all fluid. This is more of a dialogue, very non-linear, agile-based." She threw in tech terms like confetti at a sad parade. I nodded once. Understood. 10 minutes later, I was back at my desk. I opened a new document and wrote a memo titled, Summary of Culture Alignment Session, 10 o'clock a.m., Room 3B. I included who was present, what was said. I transcribed the exact slide captions. I noted the phrase misaligned with our future direction and the projected image of my face under the word disengaged. I didn't editorialize. I didn't rant. I just recorded. Because facts age better than feelings, especially in litigation. I emailed it to myself from work to my encrypted personal account. Subject line, noted. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed. A text from Elise, my friend in legal. Just 2 lines, heard about the ambush. You okay? Want me to take a look at your employment clause? I didn't respond right away. Just stared at the screen a moment, letting the heat simmer under my skin like a tea kettle waiting for someone to hear it scream. Across the office, Claire laughed loudly at something Miso did. He had his paw on a stapler like that was somehow corporate comedy now. I turned back to my screen, opened my employment contract from the company intranet, downloaded the PDF. Saved it to a new folder I titled Insurance, because I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was preparing, and Claire, she was about to learn what happens when a compliance officer stops protecting you and starts protecting herself. The thing about disappearing isn't slamming the door on your way out, it's leaving it open just wide enough that no one notices you're gone. So I started showing up at 9 o'clock a.m. sharp and left at 5 o'clock p.m. on the dot. Not a minute early, not a second late. If a server pinged out of rhythm at 5:01, it could wait till tomorrow. If someone flagged a compliance inconsistency at 6:45 p.m., they could log a ticket. If Claire wanted me to hop on a quick brainstorm about merging wellness initiatives with lab safety protocols at 7:30 p.m. on a Thursday, I was already home, watching crime documentaries and eating pad thai in my pajamas. Before, I was the kind of employee who quietly patched things at 10 p.m., who fixed spreadsheets before anyone noticed they were broken, who wrote 3 versions of every report, one for legal, one for the board, one for the people who didn't know what acronyms meant. Now, I did what was in my job description. No more, no less, and the system, it responded accordingly. The compliance dashboard began to shift, slowly, softly, like a pot of water heating under a frog. Little anomalies popped up, an equipment calibration due last week, a vendor certification 1 day past expiration, a chemical disposal log that hadn't been closed out. Nothing that screamed disaster, just enough to raise a bureaucratic eyebrow. The irony? All of it was visible, all of it was documented. No sabotage, no deletion, just passive truth gently allowed to surface. I disabled auto-renewal on the license renewal form. Again, per policy, partial employment invalidates signatory authority. My name was now grayed out in the system. The little lock icon next to primary compliance officer was engaged. All of it above board. The dashboard blinked yellow, then orange. Not red yet, that would come later. Claire never saw it, she was too busy designing hoodies. Yes, really. The Miso Lab line was her new passion project, an internal merchandise campaign she pitched as fun science-forward branding synergy. Dog-themed lab coats, leashes with the company logo, water bottles that said fetch compliance, in a cursive font that made my left eye twitch. I watched her pitch it to marketing one afternoon while sipping cold brew through a reusable straw shaped like DNA. It's not just apparel, she cooed, it's a statement. Science can be cute too, Miso yawned. I mirrored him. During her launch party, yes, she had a literal launch party in the break room with balloons and branded kibble, I sat at my desk, quietly finishing the weekly compliance overview. Normally, I'd attach a summary note, highlight the rising risk score, flag the renewal status. Instead, I just clicked save and closed the tab. They say silence is consent. I say silence is warning. A silent log, a quiet dashboard, a paused signature, all of it legal, all of it traceable. One of the techs pinged me on Slack that evening. Hey Maya, noticed the chem log from room C21 didn't update last week. System glitch? I replied simply, no glitch. The update protocol expired 3 days ago. Check with lab ops. A minute later, but you usually fix those? I didn't answer because I didn't anymore. That's the thing about disengagement, it's not loud. It doesn't protest. It doesn't shout I quit, it just withdraws. It withdraws the extra hours, the late night fixes, the little favors, the quick catches, the quiet saves. It lets the holes form naturally without interference. And when someone finally realizes they're standing on a floor full of holes, they never remember who used to patch them. Especially not when they were too busy fitting a French bulldog for a size-small lab coat. The expiration date was printed in bold on every compliance calendar in the building, September 1st, 8 o'clock a.m. But like most bolded warnings in corporate life, it had become decorative. Something to nod at in meetings, then ignore in practice. Like training required or do not microwave fish. For me, it was different. I lived by that date. I watched it inch closer every time I logged into the dashboard like a clock tower shadow creeping across a quiet town square. And now it was 2 weeks away. Tick, tick, tick. I started preparing, not in some secretive cloak and dagger way, just methodically. I downloaded every system warning, every timestamp, every auto-generated alert from the compliance software. Flagged each one with the recipient's name, time opened, and status, acknowledged, ignored, or unread. There were dozens. I drafted a formal internal memo, subject, authorized compliance signature revocation operational license renewal FY25. I explained, in legal language and polite detachment, that I no longer met the minimum hours threshold to act as an authorized signatory. I included references to the exact policy language, cited internal HR updates, attached my current pay stub. Then I filed it in the system. It triggered an automated alert to HR, legal, and the executive team. The email read, "Please be advised, Compliance Officer Meyer A. Thomas is no longer authorized to execute the annual license renewal due to reduced employment hours per HR adjustment #1837. Action required." No one replied, not HR, not legal, not Claire. One person clicked mark as read, that was it. I didn't follow up. I wasn't obligated to. I wasn't authorized anymore. I'd made that crystal clear. Instead, I prepared a folder on my encrypted drive titled TikTok. Inside, PDFs, internal emails, system screenshots, a clean paper trail of indifference. I didn't editorialize, I didn't speculate, I just documented. Because when the storm hits, people forget. They forget who warned them, who tried, who kept things running without applause. I wasn't trying anymore. Claire was deep into the third phase of her Missou merchandise rollout. Her new obsession? Branded dog bowls for employee appreciation gifts. She pitched it during an executive sync as hydration mindfulness meets pet-friendly branding. The CFO blinked twice and muttered something about budgets. Claire patted his arm and said, "Let's be innovators, not inhibitors." Meanwhile, the lab kept humming. Illegally, technicians ran assays, researchers processed compounds, chemical agents were logged, refrigerated materials came and went, all under the assumption that our license had been renewed, that the invisible machinery of compliance had done its job. It hadn't, not because I failed, but because I stopped giving them what they never respected in the first place: quiet protection. Silent coverage, the invisible scaffolding beneath their glitter and hashtags. My hours stayed at 28. No conversation, no reinstatement, no acknowledgement. Claire had gotten exactly what she wanted, a compliance officer who didn't make a fuss. And I'd given her one, the kind that followed every rule to the letter and not one step further. In my personal notes, I added a final line: Sept 1, 8:01 a.m. Auto expiry triggers system lock unless renewal verified. Then I closed my laptop, walked out at 5 p.m. sharp and bought myself a milkshake. Not because I was celebrating, but because anticipation tastes sweeter when you know exactly how the ending goes and you're the only one who read the script. Monday, 9:03 a.m. The elevator dinged like any other day. No fireworks, no dramatic entrance, just the sterile chime of doom disguised as punctuality. I didn't even look up, was halfway through organizing a Q3 audit spreadsheet when I heard it. Not the inspector. "Claire, what do you mean we're not licensed?" Her voice didn't travel, it detonated, like someone had just told her that Missou had joined a rival brand. I paused, took a slow sip of coffee, letting the bitter roast do its job. Across the office, heads started to lift like prairie dogs sensing danger. The floor went still in that eerie way where everyone is pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. From my chair, I had a clean view of the hallway. A man in a navy blazer and no-nonsense posture was standing calmly by the lab doors, flipping through a black binder thick enough to knock someone into fiscal next quarter. ID clipped to his shirt. Embossed seal. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Laboratory Oversight Division. The kind of badge that makes most people suddenly forget how to breathe. Claire rushed him, all manicured fury and confused sparkle. "There must be some mistake," she said, already fake laughing, trying to summon charm like it was a power she could invoice. "We've never had an issue. I'm the VP here, can we get this handled over coffee?" The inspector didn't smile. He held up a single sheet. "According to your most recent filings, your operational license expired at 8 a.m. this morning. Your compliance signatory is listed as Meyer A. Thomas. According to payroll, she's part-time and therefore unauthorized. That renders this facility non-compliant with federal regulations. Until resolved, your lab is suspended." Claire blinked. "But we've been running experiments all morning," he nodded. "And you've been operating illegally for 1 hour and 3 minutes. He turned, pulled a red security seal from his case, and applied it to the biometric panel on the lab entrance. The door clicked, locked, and blinked a crimson light. "Access revoked, federal hold." I didn't move, didn't smirk. Just clicked save on my spreadsheet and minimized the window. 3 engineers emerged from the lab hallway, confused and pale. One clutched a box of reagents. Another had a tray of samples mid-transfer. Claire's face was a war zone of shock and indignation. "You can't just shut us down." The inspector remained calm. "Ma'am, your license is inactive. Your lab contains federally regulated substances. That makes this a liability issue and a compliance breach. You'll receive an official notice within the hour. I recommend you inform your COO." She spun around so fast her hair hit her lip gloss. "Maya," she shrieked, "can you explain what's going on?" I looked up from my desk, blinking with practiced serenity. "You'll want to check your inbox. The memo went out 2 weeks ago." She stormed toward me, heels like gunshots. "Why didn't you tell me this was serious?" "I did," I said, taking another sip. "The system did. Legal did. You marked it as read." Around us, people were gathering, quiet, wide-eyed, hungry for answers. A kind of slow-building office crowd that smells blood in the water but doesn't want to be the first to say so. Behind Claire, the inspector was now snapping pictures of the closed lab doors, his phone clicking like a metronome of consequences. Someone whispered behind me, is that a federal lockout?" "Yes," I said without turning. "It is." At 9:14 a.m., a company-wide Slack message hit like a thunderclap. "Urgent, all lab operations suspended. Wait further instruction from legal and compliance." And then came the sound, not the siren kind, the fiscal kind. From down the hall, I heard the CFO's voice rise, raw and panicked. "Do you know how much it costs every day that lab is closed?" $1 million. Claire's hand dropped from her hip like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She looked at me again, less fury now, more fear. I just nodded once. Tick-tock. And then I opened a new tab. Labeled it, License Reinstatement Procedure Draft. I didn't start typing yet. I was waiting on a call. The boardroom smelled like hot toner and cold panic. It was 10:02 a.m. by the time the first emergency meeting convened, executives red-eyed from Slack pings, legal dragging their briefcases behind them like body bags, IT plugging in an emergency projector that refused to cooperate. CFO looked like he'd aged 10 fiscal years in under an hour. The COO just kept muttering, 1 million per day, like it was a rosary for the damned. Claire, still wearing her blush pink dog mom hoodie with Miso LAB Elite embroidered in gold thread, was flailing through her phone like she could scroll the crisis away. It's clearly a system glitch, she insisted. The dashboard must have auto-flagged something wrong. Maya's usually on top of this. That earned her a few looks. Not from me, I wasn't invited to this meeting. But I knew what was happening. I'd seen the calendar invite bounce around from legal to C-suite, titled with one word, urgent. From what Elise told me later, it started with Claire's usual deflection. The renewal form probably didn't sync. Maybe IT can backdate a correction? This doesn't have to be dramatic. The General Counsel didn't speak at first, just sat still, flipping through a printed copy of the operating license packet like it was a holy text. His fingers hovered over Section 6, Paragraph 3. License must be renewed annually by an authorized compliance officer actively employed at no fewer than 30 hours per week. Documentation must reflect eligibility at time of signature. He looked up, brows knitting. Wait, Maya's still listed as the signatory, correct? Claire blinked. Well, yeah, she always is. It's her job, is it? He asked flatly. He turned to HR, who had been trying to look invisible in the corner. Pull up her time card, he said. The HR rep, a thin, sweating man with a notepad he hadn't written on once, typed something on his laptop, eyes flicking across the screen. Then he paled. Last month she dropped to 28 hours, he said quietly. Effective immediately. Adjustment hash 1837. Initiated by Claire. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was heavy, like sound had been vacuum sealed out of the room. Claire opened her mouth, then closed it again as if trying to manually reboot her alibi processor. But she's still here. She's been working. I mean, what's 2 hours? That's a rounding error. The General Counsel looked like someone had just handed him a grenade with a sticky note that said oopsie. He pinched the bridge of his nose, then exhaled hard through his teeth. Didn't just cut her hours, he said slowly. You disqualified her. Under federal licensing standards, part-time compliance officers are ineligible to sign renewal documents. Claire was now doing the math in real time, which was dangerous considering she once confused ISO certification with her iPhone's screen brightness. But it's Maya, she said again, as though repeating my name would summon a magical reset. He didn't look at her. He looked at the page, at the signature field, at the red incomplete stamp now permanently attached to our compliance logs. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Get her on the phone, now." No exclamation, no rage, just the kind of cold directive that rearranges careers. HR scrambled. Legal opened their laptops like war medics. Claire stared at the tabletop, blinking furiously as if someone had just unplugged her power supply. But I didn't pick up the phone. I saw it ring, screen flashing unknown EXT priority, and placed it face down beside my keyboard. Then I opened my email where 3 new messages had just arrived. One from the General Counsel titled, "Please respond, critical." One from the COO, "We need to talk." And one from Claire herself, "Can we reset?" Smiling face with smiling eyes, I closed all 3 without opening them. Instead, I sent a forward reply to Elise in legal. He read it, huh. Her response was one emoji. Grimacing face, I went back to my spreadsheet. Scrolled down to the last entry in the log file I'd named TikTok. Line 74, system failure due to executive decision, not system error. Saved, backed up, let them call. Let them panic. I'd warned them. And now they were out of time. The ceramic clink of coffee cups and the low hiss of the espresso machine made a soothing soundtrack to the unraveling of an empire. I sat by the window at Hopper and Bean, my favorite little spot 3 blocks away from HQ, far enough to avoid accidental run-ins, close enough to hear the building metaphorically scream through Slack pings. Elise sat across from me, her laptop open, her screen full of paragraphs that glittered like legal landmines. The document's title in bold, Employment Reinstatement Agreement, Meyer A. Thomas. She didn't ask how I wanted my coffee. She already knew. We'd shared enough late-night calls and quiet rants over Thai takeout for her to understand that today required something special, a lavender oat milk latte and a seat that faced the street. I wanted a front-row view of chaos without getting any on me. At 10:31 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Call number 6, unknown X priority. I let it ring. Elise raised an eyebrow over the rim of her mug. "You gonna answer eventually?" I smiled, stirring my drink slowly. Nope, voicemail was full anyway. I'd let it get there, on purpose. A digital equivalent of a doorbell with the batteries ripped out. She clicked the trackpad. Good, because I just got off the phone with their General Counsel's paralegal. He sounded like someone who'd just realized the fire extinguisher was decorative. Another buzz. This time a text from General Counsel, please, just talk to us. Name your terms. Elise read it over my shoulder. Oof. He's moved from denial to bargaining. Classic second stage panic. I tapped out a reply. One line, no emotion, no apology. Kindly route all requests through my contract attorney. Smiling face with smiling eyes send. Elise snorted. You really had to add the emoji. Had to, I said. It's the new brand standard. The coffee shop's ambient jazz played on, and somewhere in the background, someone dropped a tray. A metaphor, probably. Lise pulled up the final version of the reinstatement agreement. You sure you want to go back? I don't want to, but I will, I said, eyes locked on the bolded demands halfway down the page. On my terms, with safeguards, and with enough back pay to personally sponsor Claire's nervous breakdown. We reviewed the terms again. 40 hours minimum guaranteed. VP title with board-level access. Full back pay to date of our reduction. Independent compliance team. Selected by me. Non-interference clause tied to Claire's involvement. Annual renewal bonuses indexed to federal policy updates. Elise had even added a clause I didn't ask for, whistleblower retaliation protection and pre-cleared media contact rights. She didn't say it aloud, but we both knew what that was for, just in case someone got cute later. My phone buzzed again. This time, Claire, hey ye, can we talk one-on-one? Just us girls. I think we got off on the wrong paw-winking. Elise laughed so hard she almost dropped her latte. I replied with a period. Just a single dot, no context, no warmth, she wouldn't get it, but that was fine, it wasn't for her. At 11:05 a.m., Elise hit send on the PDF and addressed it to legal, HR, and the COO. The subject line was simple: reinstatement agreement execution required prior to license activation. In a quiet corner of the shop, I watched the world outside keep spinning, cars passing, people laughing, phones buzzing with fires not mine to put out. I wasn't hiding. I was choosing, and for once they were the ones waiting on me. The boardroom was dead quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't invite words, it suffocates them. Claire sat in one of the far chairs, a crumpled version of her former self. Her usually perky ponytail was limp. Her hoodie, once proudly embroidered with Miso LAB Elite, was wrinkled and stained with what looked like a splash of turmeric latte and regret. She looked like she hadn't slept, hadn't blinked, hadn't stopped Googling how to undo federal shutdowns since Friday. The COO stood near the end of the table, arms folded, jaw tight. If looks could fire people, she'd already be a footnote. I stepped inside, nothing flashy. No dramatic pause in the doorway. Just a plain blazer, slacks, low heels, hair tied back. No makeup. No need. The power was in the paper I held, a single printed sheet that weighed more than the entire brand strategy Claire had spent 6 months vomiting onto Instagram. I walked to the head of the table and placed it in front of the General Counsel. These are my terms, I said. He didn't even blink. Just pulled out his pen and started reading like he'd been waiting for this moment since the stone tablets were carved. Clause 1, 40 hours weekly minimum, no exception. Clause 2, title adjusted to Vice President of Regulatory Integrity. Clause 3, direct reporting access to the board, bypassing all intermediate executive filters. Clause 4, authority to select and build an independent compliance team with autonomous budget. Clause 5, retroactive compensation from date of unlawful hour reduction, plus discretionary performance bonus indexed to damage control. Clause 6, non-interference provision prohibiting any currently suspended executive from engaging in compliance matters. Claire's head snapped up at that last one. Wait, suspended? I turned to the COO. Is she authorized to speak? He didn't flinch. No, she's suspended pending internal review. Claire's mouth hung open. She looked at the General Counsel like he might object, like he might save her. He didn't look up. I pulled out my ID badge and handed it to the HR director sitting quietly against the wall. New one, please, I said. This one's expired. He took it with shaking hands and nodded. The General Counsel reached the end of the page, signed his name at the bottom of the agreement, and slid it back to me. Welcome back, VP Thomas. I nodded once, pulled out my laptop, and opened the compliance dashboard. The red alert blinked at the top of the screen. License inactive. Renewal required. I clicked sign, authenticated with the new two-factor clearance HR had reissued, and watched the dashboard turn green. Clean, compliant, legal. The COO leaned forward. How long until operations resume? Immediately, I said. License is live. Inspector's been waiting for confirmation. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Text from the field agent, received confirmation. Padlock removed. Entry access re-enabled. I read it silently and turned the phone so the room could see. Claire slumped in her seat, half whispering, thank God. But the General Counsel, without looking up, said, not for you. Downstairs, the red padlock was unclipped, lifted, removed like a curse broken. Staff re-entered the lab, lights flickered back on, machines spun to life. And Claire, she stormed toward the elevator with her badge held high, only to stop short at the access panel. Red light, she swiped again. Red light. Her badge was dead. The COO walked past her without stopping. Security will escort you to clear out your desk. She turned, wide-eyed. Maya, I didn't even look at her. Just kept walking toward the lab. The real one, where science happens, not slogans. Where systems don't need to bark or brand or beg for attention. They just do their job, kind of like me when I'm allowed to. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.